Forbes magazine just put out that we were 45th out of 50 states in small business friendliness, which it can't be good because I think of the culture of Maine as very sort of small business oriented, and to be that far down the list seems like another shot in the foot, self-inflicted wise. Do you have specific examples? Like, do you have a little wall of shame? Like, I can't believe we still have, X that makes it so hard for these small businesses for no reason?
One that is always funny to me is that we were working on legislation last year with, coffee shops and trying to get the state to update some of their laws because they're out of compliance just based on outdated language that they're using. So, like, for example, soda fountains in coffee shops. The Department of Labor can go into a business, into a coffee shop, and if you don't have a soda fountain that's up to their standards in the law, then they can cite you for a violation. Show me where there is a soda fountain in anything in the last 30 or 40
years.
Like
a soda fountain like this? Like a bubble thing with the... Or do you mean like a water fountain?
Exactly. The seltzer, the syrup. I mean, it's not a common practice. There's so many examples like that where they create a law that's well-intentioned, and then it just sits on the books forever, and it trips up employers down the line.
Nate, I'm thinking Topsom High School now, going back, 15, 20 years, and there's young Nate who is into French and tennis. Was that kind of mainstream, or how did you get to those?
The tennis was mainstream. I guess both were mainstream for me for quite a while. My grandparents had a lot to do with both. They brought me to the tennis court at a young age, and they spoke French to me at a young age. And I decided to keep those with me apparently through middle school and high school. I was swinging rackets anytime I could to, when I didn't want to do homework, when that's what I was doing, when I wanted to, get some exercise, that was the answer too.
That was it. And unlike other sports, even when you're old and broken, you can keep playing it, right?
That's right. And they made pickleball for the lazy man's tennis now.
When you grew up in Topsom, what did you then leave? What brought you away, and how'd you get back?
I did. I've always been in Maine. I did the 4 years up at the University of Maine, studied French there, also played tennis there, so stayed pretty consistent with my years of work. Went to school to teach French and English, thought that that's what I wanted to do forever. Did that for a couple of years, absolutely loved it, then got sucked into the world of politics and have never looked back.
What caused you? What was the tipping point, and where were you teaching French and English?
I was at Hamden Academy, and this was shortly after they had just built it. This was when $50 million bought you a really nice school, and it was beautiful. It was such a great experience because I was getting to, for a portion of it, take some classes at the same time and really do what I was loving, to be able to teach and do French and English at the same time.
And then politics comes how?
I started volunteering on campaigns probably around 2010, 2011. Local party groups would say, hey, we need people to march in parades. That's usually how people are dragged in at first. I bring my brother and sister when they were, yay height, or 5, 6 years old. They were marching in parades with me, so they're getting in their work too now. But that's generally how it went, was you start with parades, and then you start going to local meetings, learning about candidates and different ideas. And I just have loved it ever since.
Tourism. How do you go from candidate to a full-time advocate for the state's hotel, restaurant, tourism community, which is it's got to be our biggest economic sector?
It's huge. It's in, depending on how you look at it, it's in its top 2 or 3. Just a huge, profound impact on the overall Maine economy. And I have to say, I mean, what a what a pleasure for me, and how lucky am I to be able to be one of the voices for tourism and hospitality. When you think of how important it is to our overall state success, you have a $16 billion annual impact on the Maine economy. I mean, that's just crazy.
What you threw me off there. Second or third? Who's first? Don't say the government.
I close, I bet. The marine and aquaculture folks like to claim first.
Okay, fisheries is first.
That's right, and then tourism, I'd say.
Tourism, and then who you butting up against on the third? Is it forest product?
Forest product.
Forest product. Yeah, yeah. They'd be winning if anybody wanted any paper, but instead, the wood goes out and somebody else is making money on it somewhere else, right?
It's true, and I mean, you look at the mill industry. That's taken a complete turn in the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, so tragic. We drive by those mills and a sort of forlorn. So when you're advocating for tourism, let's start with the good news. Like, I'm sure all three of our listeners, we'll be able to answer this for you. But what are the wins at the back of tourism in Maine? What does every restaurateur, hotel chain, hotelier thank baby Jesus for every morning when they start their day?
It comes down to our beautiful landscape and our unrelenting love to be hospitable hosts to people who want to visit our state.
Yeah.
We are able to boast some of the best restaurants in the world. I mean, every year we're just getting award after award.
Michelin star per capita, Paris, eat your heart out.
It's amazing, and it's bringing people back. I want to go to Paris to see some of that best food. Well, Portland, Maine just popped up again. So people who love to be foodies always are coming back to see what's next.
What do you think got the chefs going here? Was it that they wanted to raise their kids in the community that we do, or what? Give me the chicken and the egg backstory on these incredible chefs. How do we end up with this sort of over allotment of incredible restaurateurs?
We've got a really good programs with apprenticeships with existing restaurants, and that's one area that, especially with chefs, we're able to, once we find that talent in high schools, we work with these groups that are called like Pro Start, where they really are able to go in, find who's got this talent, cultivate them, bring them, elevate them to the national level, teach them these skills, and then show them how they can run a business as and be a part of a business in Maine. So a lot of that's attributed to the current structure between apprenticeships and the local chefs that are dedicated to finding that next generation, because they will phase out.
Okay, so great chefs, great landscape. What's the stat? More coastline than any state in the nation, including California, if you add up the circumference of all our islands and coves.
Isn't that amazing? It's the longest coastline in the country. And I think Harpswell, the town of Harpswell, is the longest coastline in the state, which is a nice title for them to be able to boast.
Not a surprise. I go to Chainsaw Weekend at the Gatewoods House in Cundees Harbor there, and their own house must be a mile if you take all the little slits in the granite that the water runs in and out of and call it coastline. All right. Bad news. Those are tailwinds, and they're profound, and they make us the either second or third largest source of gross domestic product in the state. What's the headwinds? What's in our face?
The biggest thing in our face is that we can't, if we do have talent here, we can't convince them to stay. And if they do stay, the cost of doing business and the price of doing business, both professionally and financially, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze. And that's a scary phenomenon for a lot of folks.
Juice not worth the squeeze for the high potential small business owner. Okay, talk about first of all, why not more juice? Probably winter.
Winter is a big part of it. It's the state, they've always been trying to think of ways of how can we be creative about incentivizing and marketing the state to be more attractive for winter sports, for winter activities. Bring your Quebec's pretty good at that. They're known for their winter carnival.
Yeah. I was in Presque Isle this summer, and we were driving around, and the guy who runs MMG Insurance was saying that the outfitters up there, Matt McHatton, was it? Don't market much. Don't, you discover these places and you're blown away, but they don't really sort of jump into the economic ecosystem the way you might imagine. What is that?
It's so hard, especially if you're for restaurants, especially. I mean, they're working on 3 to 5% profit margins. And that first year that you're in there, you're there open to close, trying your best to make sure that you're going to be able to make payroll for the next week. So there's a lot of sweat equity and a lot of your own personal will that you need to put into it to be successful. And that commitment is just, it's not something that everybody's willing to do.
And if on top of that, you're going to be all alone doing it, if you're going to try it in winter, it might be too much. What about self-inflicted wounds? I mean, obviously we can't control the weather. What do we do to ourselves that holds back our tourism?
Well, and on the weather, it's a lot of people in the industry like to say that you make money for 3 to 4, maybe 5 months out of the year if you're lucky, and then you lose your hat on everything else. So you got to really prioritize the good times. So having that support during the good times, the support of a great Department of Labor that is there to promote and grow your workforce, to educate you, to ensure that you have all the tools you need to be able to have a successful business. That's not really something that I'm hearing from a lot of businesses, unfortunately, especially when you look at a state that has a much more friendly structure, both business and tax-wise, like New Hampshire.
So yeah, I'm thinking almost every restaurant and hotel in Maine is at least somewhat seasonal. So that family leave mandate must have been super hard for them.
Oh, you've heard about that?
Oh God. Well, I just couldn't. I mean, a lot of companies have had it for years because their economic model supports it, but jamming it down the throat of people who don't have it supported, and it seems like I'm thinking of somebody who's barely able to pay people over the table in the first place. It's sort of an incentive to go underground.
Well, Jonathan, that's one of those things that the government and policymakers, lawmakers think that they're doing something good for businesses, and they're very well intentioned. But it's taking this one size fits all approach to businesses that employ 250, 500 people, and putting the same mandate as somebody that has a mom and pop shop. Most people forget that small businesses don't have an HR department. It's a one man show. So if you don't have the support, the knowledge, the commitment, the knowledge of really how to find this information that's constantly changing as well, that's another big piece of it, then it just becomes very hard for you to keep your head above water in those respects.
You bring up small business, and of course, most of your members there must be some chains, but most of them must be small businesses. Forbes magazine just put out that we were 45th out of 50 states in small business friendliness, which it can't be good because I think of the culture of Maine as very sort of small business oriented, and to be that far down the list seems like another shot in the foot, self-inflicted wise. Do you have specific examples? Like, do you have a little wall of shame? Like, I can't believe we still have, X that makes it so hard for these small businesses for no reason?
It's such a good question because I really should get a big whiteboard that every time I see one of these, I just write one down to just add it to the list. And within a couple of weeks, I'm going to have a full whiteboard. But one that is always funny to me is that we were working on legislation last year with coffee shops and trying to get the state to update some of their laws because they're out of compliance just based on outdated language that they're using. So, like for example, a soda fountains in coffee shops. The Department of Labor can go in and into a coffee shop, and if you don't have a soda fountain that's up to their standards in the law, then they can cite you for a violation. Show me where there is a soda fountain in anything in the last 30 or
You
40
mean like a
years.
soda fountain like this, like a bubble thing with the, or do you
You're
mean like a
taking this
water
out
fountain?
there. Exactly. The seltzer, the syrup. I mean, it's not a common practice. There's so many examples like that where they create a law that's well intentioned, and then it just sits on the books forever, and it trips up employers down the line.
You and I were talking the other day. I was thinking of one of your examples that made me think of the wall of shame idea was if you have a kid a minute over, it's $1,000. Like, normally, hey, we're late. We got slammed. Oh, we'll pay you overtime. But if it's somebody under 18, is it, or something like that, 1 minute over 8 hours, and it's $1,000 fine? What I can't remember exactly what it is.
Yeah, all fines start at $1,000 for those types of violations. The administration, the Department of Labor last year took a very different approach to how they're going to handle their relationships with businesses. Historically, I think it's been centered towards education and compliance, and it's really shifted to enforcement and penalties. And if you have that kid that's 17, 16, and they're a minute over and you get that violation, that's $1,000. Will they probably knock it down for the first time? Yeah. But why is the mindset, and maybe you have an answer to this, why is the mindset all of a sudden that high deterrence, high penalties means that's going to get businesses to perform better? It
Well, I
just
did
doesn't.
notice that we suddenly got upside down in the budget. Maybe they just need the money.
Right.
Like, hey, if we bust enough 17-year-olds, we could, maybe we'll close the $1 billion hole.
That's one way to do it. And I mean, I'm sure it was the same for you too. Like growing up, I mean, when I was playing tennis, I remember my coach would expect us, especially on days before matches, that you'd have a double practice, that we'd be indoors over at Maine Pines in Brunswick, and we were there until 9-10 o'clock at night sometimes.
And those are honestly kind of character defining experiences. Remembering those. I mean, I started my own little business as my first job, yard work, and God knows I didn't understand that there were laws about how to start a business. I got a little metal gray cash box and, a little carbon thing, and decided I was a business. But we had plenty of 12-hour days that we were thrilled with ourselves, showing each other our briar scratches on our hands. The idea that would be illegal, aside from the impact on small business, doesn't seem to be a great impact on character either.
No, because we're, especially in today's world of social media and what teenagers are exposed to, it's so different than it was just 10 or 15 years ago. So giving children the opportunity to be a part of something greater, whether it is sports or having a job that they find this passion and that turns into a career, that's really where we need to be thinking about, how do we improve this state? Let's give kids some experience. Let's introduce them to things that will open their mind.
All right, now
If-
hold on. I don't want to get into good news and optimism too quickly here, Nate.
yeah, that's true.
I want to stick in misery for and reprobation for a minute longer, because I want to talk about my favorite microaggression against youth, the 21-year-old drinking law. And I'm now imagining it from the perspective of the restaurant owner. You mentioned fines. What was the I mean, I guess you lose your liquor license eventually, but what's the first offense if a kid comes in and they end up being underage?
Max is up to a year in jail and a few $1,000 penalty.
A few $1,000 penalty and a year in jail for giving a platoon leader,
That's right,
who led his troops into Fallujah, a Budweiser.
doesn't make much sense to me.
Well, I mean, obviously, from the perspective of trying to run a small business, a restaurant, it's another one of those very odd, out of proportion, and odd assignment of responsibility problem. But I also think of it from the perspective of the kid. My kids, most of my kids are way past drinking age, but I'm pretty sure that speeding and drinking were the only two laws that my kids broke. And I don't mean speeding like going 120. I mean going 78. And as a result, they all had the experience of getting a little heart race when there's a cop, as opposed to being relieved, comfortable, etc. And they had the experience of drinking in places where there was no bartender saying, "Hey, buddy, I'm thinking enough's enough at this point."
You're right on. I mean, it shows how we differ too culturally from places like Europe that look at these things completely differently.
Isn't it weird when we're more regulated than Europe? It's like,
When did that happen?
holy cow, somebody look at me in the mirror. What have I done? Who am I becoming?
It's a problem. I mean, it's always starts with well intentions, but
Yeah.
then it ends up.
Sure, this was the kids, the drunk driving problem, and we needed it brothers again. I mean, I there's this wonderful cycle, Nate. You make such a great point about, they all start well-meaning, and a bunch of legislators get together. How are we going to make this never happen again? You even see laws named after people. Marjorie's Law, because Marjorie died because, nobody inspected the basement gas pipeline or whatever it was. And then it takes on a life of its own, and we wonder what happened to ourselves. So, okay, now we're done. We're done being negative. What are the big, you're getting together with these hoteliers and restaurant people constantly, talking to them constantly. You see all what were we, 2,485 bills last year through our tiny little state legislature, and you look at them all. Is this going to affect the restaurants? What's David Letterman's kind of top 3 wishes that your group would go, oh my God, things are gonna be way better now, other than canceling winter, which may be happening anyway?
That's true. It seems, especially because the last few years have been warmer on record.
Yeah, you do get the feeling that the shoulder seasons are getting broader for tourist folks.
It's true. I mean, September has been doing consistently better sales-wise than June, the month of June, year over year.
Interesting.
Which is showing you that folks are maybe willing to put on
Everybody's cottoning on to Maine's best kept secret.
Right. We'll put on a coat and weather of
course, the reason everyone in Maine loves September is because the tourists have left. Now we're going to have them, so that's okay.
Right. One of I slightly mentioned it earlier, but it was letting kids be kids and experience what they want. Right now, we're doing way too much policing to say, this is what's best for kids. Let kids figure that out. Let's let our curriculum have what matches the needs of our state. We need plumbers, electricians to be able to support these tourism and hospitality businesses. Let's get these kids matched with success before they graduate so that they're ready to go when they're out of high school. They don't need to get saddled with 40, 50, $100,000 of debt.
Is that if you were to poll hoteliers, restaurateurs, all the tourist folks along the track, would that be their favorite, or is that just you having experienced Maine education?
That's a little bit of my own pontification, but the workforce
I like the
shortage,
sound of it either way.
yeah, the workforce shortage is number one. You can't have a business if you don't have the workers, even if does cost a lot of money.
So is there a change in law that would take us from what, 9% of kids not playing, labor participation rates, in the 90% to the 95? Do you have in that upper right drawer of yours the Maine Tourism Association's proposed legislation?
No, I don't. And we unfortunately don't try these things because it's year after year it's shot down, and there's no desire from opponents of that idea to come to the table to
Define it
compromise.
till they like it.
Right. So it becomes discouraging after a certain point. So we've got to rely on things like H-2B programs, which are unreliable. I mean,
This is the bringing seasonal workers from other countries.
exactly. And there's no guarantee year over year that you will get the number of workers that you need.
Oh, you mean you could get your permit, your number discount? And who does that? The feds, or is that a state law? Or
That's regulated by the feds.
so we ask Washington how many people we can bring in to run the, summer resort in Bar Harbor.
Exactly. And it literally is a hope and a prayer every year for places like big hotels in Bar Harbor that need 100 employees more than they needed, 2
That is the
weeks.
strangest thing I ever heard. So you're saying I'm going to house these people, pay them, and send them home when I'm done housing and paying them, but you still won't give me all the people I want?
Exactly. It's a problem.
That's odd, isn't it?
Number 2 for you, though, on the wish list that they would say, and this is something we're working on this year, is workforce housing initiatives.
Yeah.
The cost of
How about just housing?
Yeah, we need housing, but employers want to be a partner in the solution because they have ideas. Some of them have the capital, some of them have the resources to be able to contribute to the housing stock. So let's have the state partner with them to increase supply, increase production, get a space for these folks to be able to live so that they can live near, one, where they're working, and two, have an affordable option. So that's a big problem right now, is especially in cities like Portland, it costs so much money for hospitality workers and anybody to be able to live there that they've got to live out of town, and it's not sustainable.
And the Green New Deal won't let them build new keys.
Oh yeah, Portland's its own beast, unfortunately.
Yeah, we shouldn't get it. We'll never come out. We go in the Portland door, we may never come out.
Sure.
But that's interesting. Just the structural issue of more places to stay in Maine is literally your top 2 issue to help tourism.
Yes, because if we are able to hire more people, means we can expand our economic growth, the amount of hours that are open. How many people are upset when they go to their favorite restaurant on a Monday night and they get there and it's closed because they're only open 3 days a week now?
Because they can't staff it.
And that's primarily because they can't staff it.
All right. So kill winter. Bunch of microaggressions against reason, micro sort of fines for little things, and more places to live. And I guess kill winter does relate to demand, right? That, do you feel like the Maine tourist industry has more demand than it supplies? In other words, if we did these things, would there immediately be more, or is there a marketing awareness kind of outreach that needs to happen also?
There's definitely a lot of marketing and awareness that would need to go behind it. People don't realize, by and large, that there's a at a northern Maine beyond Bangor.
Yeah, which is so stunningly beautiful.
But that's where Maine gets really good. You get up to Moosehead Lake, Jackman. I mean, that's the piece of Maine tourism that people are missing.
Maybe we should get into Lyft for a minute. What do you guys get together and talk about the number of nonstop flights into Maine? The highways, the roads. Does any of that come up at in your association level?
It does, and it's mostly in grumblings that there's not enough flights and the roads aren't good enough quality.
Yeah. Okay.
Always looking for ways to market Maine to say, airlines, bring more direct flights here. How can we convince you to get more people on a plane here for $50? Like Breeze Airways is a great example. You get $50, $60 flights between here in South Carolina, here in Florida, back. Can't beat it.
Yeah, I'd love to see more of that. I was on the board of Penobscot Island Air before it just sold recently to a great guy. There was a drone company that was piloting. There were two, and one would take people and the other would take just cargo, but it would be sort of short haul electric drone flights. I would think that Maine would be such a great place to start messing around with new kinds of commuter aircraft. We've got all these little tiny airports. You could never justify the huge TSA footprint necessarily, but such a great experience to get out into Maine if it could be more affordable.
That's just it. And the state has struggled too with transit and transportation. Once you get past Brunswick, really, there's no way for you to take a bus or to take a train up north that's going to be easy or accessible. It's really something that's missing in our state that a lot of other states have figured out how to solve.
And it's kind of a chicken and egg problem. Like if we could get them going, we could probably fill them, but it's hard to creep your way up into them.
Exactly. And it's very expensive.
Okay. The best short-term win for your association. What are the easy, like, boy, would this make a difference? And it's a concrete thing that we could do next year. What's at the top of your list?
What would be very helpful is if we started to think about how can we phase out the income tax and lower the meals and lodging taxes so that people aren't incentivized to look elsewhere to live, work, and play. I know that I had a very prominent restaurant member who had a restaurant in Maine, closed last year. It was open for 30 years or more. Now he only does business in New Hampshire. We need to think about the impact of that and how we can prevent that from happening. Let's ask the snowbirds who spend 6 months in a day in Florida, what's it going to take you to come back and contribute to our tax base, to our economy?
We go all the way back to the beginning of this podcast with that. It's winter and 7% and 7%.
That's exactly right.
It's not just winter, it's winter and a giant blistering penalty, almost the highest in the country, for being here, and a huge reward for being somewhere else more of that time. That's a great point. I mean, God, I don't know if we've modeled whether we're making money or losing money on that number, but it's got to be upside down if you include who would come and stay and eat and invite friends and be at festivals like the Canadian one you were talking about at the beginning. Fed to, what was it called? The Carnival.
Yeah, Carnival.
Yeah. Great one. I love that one, Nate.
Yeah, it's super interesting, Jonathan, because you see states like New Hampshire and you have to think, how are they doing it? And why can't we do it? If I have businesses and members that are saying, I'd rather do business and contribute to Massachusetts' economy, that keeps me up at night. It gives me heartburn. And the government should be thinking, that's a crisis. People don't want to be in Maine. That's not a good that's not a good look for our long-term solutions.
I love it. If I've got a restaurant idea, what are we talking in terms of dollars and time for me to actually be up and running?
It's quite a bit, and it's quite a bit of money, and it's quite a bit of commitment and time. I can tell you that a good job for somebody who's knowledgeable in the industry would be a consultant for just that, because there are hoops both locally and statewide for permits, health permits, worker permits, local municipal permits for your plumbing, your sewer. So many things that you just really don't think about that take a lot of time.
Do you have on our wall of shame, we've got to have number of permits that you need to open your doors?
Exactly. And how about when I need to go get those permits, that maybe I can have a one-stop shop to be able to get them, not visit, Susie at the municipal office who's only open at 4 o'clock on Thursdays.
Yeah. Paper checks only, please.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. Some sort of omnibus nerve center. You go in, this is what I want. Okay, there's 32 permits. Click here, you're done.
Right.
Yeah, I love it. How much of the inspection on that stuff is prospective versus reactive? In other words, do you have to kind of take a test, or is it just like once you get the permit, it's just paperwork? There's no evaluation.
They do have to take, especially in restaurants, there's tests that they have to take for a lot of health requirements. But once you're able to pass that, they're pretty good about touching base with you every few years to make sure you're staying up to date on codes and things like that. The biggest hurdle is that initial step.
Just getting through it all. So once you're up and running, how many times should a restaurant expect to be kind of inspected a year? Or
I have restaurants that'll tell me they get visited every year, and I have restaurants that have told me that they've never been visited.
Okay. So it's not onerous once you get through the door.
Right.
Got it. Well, that's good news.
It is. This goes back to the Department of Labor that has said, they want to move towards more proactive enforcement. So they want to be more involved in looking for violations. So maybe that's going to change. I don't know.
Is the membership loyal and excited, or is it really hard to get members to get these small businesses to join up and participate?
They're loyal and excited. I mean, we're very lucky.
What percentage of restaurants would you say are dues paying members?
Well, we've got about 3,600 restaurants in the state. And of those, at least for Hospitality Maine, we've got about 800 of those.
Okay.
So we have a good chunk of that.
What's the matter with those other 2,800 bums?
Well, that's the thing. A lot of it's chasing members. But what's a prospective or former members, you know how it is that once somebody doesn't pay a due for 1 year, it's chasing them after that, and they say they'll get back in. But they really are fired up about a lot of this stuff. I'm lucky to have members like Steve DeMillo. DeMillo's on the Water. He's been doing it for 50 years. The guy is probably the most committed individual I know to seeing hospitality and the restaurant industry succeed in Maine. So that
place is iconic. Jesus.
It is. And people come to Maine and to Portland to say, where's the restaurant that's on the water? Where's that big boat?
That's it. That's it.
It's iconic. We are lucky, though, I'll say, with our membership, that they're one of the tough pieces is they assume that somebody else is going to do it. So I don't need to be a member because somebody else is going to join. And
these associations are huge freeloader challenges, because it's like you definitely have to do the work, whether the guy who's not a member gets the benefit regardless.
Exactly. So the people who are in are really in. I mean, they want to be in.
That makes sense. Nate Cloutier, merci beaucoup pour votre temps. Thank you very much for your time. I think what you do is amazing, and I hope we get after your wall of shame here in Maine one of these days.
You know, I am going to set that up, and I'll send you a picture of it once I start adding to it.
I got a spot on a website with your name on it, Nate. I'm holding you to that.
That's perfect. I love it.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks for tuning in to Maine for Keeps. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to follow us on social media, click and share with your friends, or get on to mainforkeeps.com. If you have ideas for new content or podcast guests, or if you'd like to give us some money to support the effort, be sure to click and send. We're at team@mainforkeeps.com, and I'm at jb@mainforkeeps.com. Thanks. See you soon.